Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, February 28th, 2023 meeting of the school committee. I would invite those of us here in the studio to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I think you do have to mute that or turn the volume all the way down.
To the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think you can mute that because I think that it's coming through there.
Laptops need to be muted.
Yeah.
Here are your speakers.
Okay, so I think we're better now?
Yeah.
All right, good evening. So we have a special meeting here and we have just a couple of items on our agenda and then we will be joining the select board for their meeting down at Town Hall. Dr. Kavanaugh, do you want to go ahead and start with the presentation?
Surely. So Mrs. Rothermick and I have put together some slides just talking about our school budget, our school capital budget, how that looks over 5 years and how that sort of weaves into the town's capital budget over the next 5 years. So what you'll see in this presentation are items for consideration that extend from FY24 through FY28. And it's really important for, I think, the taxpayers, people who are living in Hopkinton, to note that the capital items that you see in our planning, they have to be evaluated. So they are things that the school department will bring forth as needs, and some of them are, more dire needs, more immediate needs, things that you can put off to, a successive fiscal year, all of those things as we take a look at these items. So when we look at them, we look at them based on need and then also the town's ability to fund them. And it's also very important to remember that while we have a 10-year plan, and you'll see 5 years tonight, it's really a 1 year at a time plan. So as the school committee votes on the capital budget, you do that 1 fiscal year at a time. As the select board, as the town, it's always 1 fiscal year at a time. And I think that that helps us in the same way that when you budget for your household, you look at your needs and then you say, is this something that we have to do this year? Maybe we don't have the money for it, let's put it off until next year. So that's the way we really approach our capital budgeting. The slide that you see up on the screen right now, these were the school items. Sorry. These were the school items that appeared in our 5-year budgeting tool. These were all of our FY24 asks. And I know that you've seen Mrs. Rothermick make that presentation many, many times. The ones that are circled in red are the ones that no longer appear in the FY24 budget. So these were the ones that didn't quite make it to the next phase. There are a couple of interesting ones here, and I'll let Mrs. Rothermick talk about this as well. When we get to the next slide and you can see where the town's budget is and how we fit into it, you'll notice that the generators are not there. It's just a small item. It's a $30,000 item and it carries all the way out to FY28. So that just might be an oversight. But I think tonight it's really important for us to be able to say, what were the things the schools put forward? What were the things that are going forward through the town? Have any of these things been put off to subsequent years? And then the other piece I think that's interesting on this slide is the purple boxed item, which is kitchen equipment. You'll see that that has moved as well. And I don't know if there are things that you want to add to that.
Yeah, so again, as we look at the 5-year plan, which really is also part of the 10-year plan, we're looking at both age, expected life, and condition. So that's how we plan out these 10 years. But in addition, the current year is what has risen to the top. So not only age, condition, but potentially, is it enrollment driven? Are there changes that need to be made? Are there repairs that are beyond the cost of actually just replacing the equipment? So that's how some things move from column to column. And so the FY25 out for the next 10 years will continue to change annually each time I present it to you, because again, it's a planning tool.
So these were the ones that we had presented, and if you take a look at the town's website, what you see on the screen right now are the items that appear in the town's complete 5-year budget planning tool. And so you can see that this is a screenshot. Above that, there would have been other, municipal departments, and then below this, there would have also been other municipal departments. The slide before, you can see there were 17 items, and now we are down to 14 items. The kitchen equipment, and this is the purple box that I had referred to before, the town still has it all the way out to FY27 and FY28, and we'll talk a little bit about the kitchen equipment when we get to the next slide. But the other things that are not here are the high school track and field project and the Marathon School Playground project, and that may be because when we talked about it, we also talked about procuring some CPC funding, which has not come through for us. One other thing that I wanted to show you is if you take a look at the Elmwood School renovation or replacement, it's listed here at $120 million. And we'll talk about this again when we get to the next slide, but that is a number that remains, I think, fairly nebulous. Sometimes you see it and it gets a lot higher, sometimes you see it and it gets slightly lower. All right, so I will ask Mrs. Rothmick to talk about this because I think this is where we are kind of today. These were the things that were recommended by the town manager for our FY24 capital budget.
Correct. So when you look at the 24 column, these are the items that have moved forward. The HVAC, those 3 items have been bundled into one article. So when you look at the town meeting warrant, it will just say HVAC, and that total amount is all added together. As Dr. Kavanaugh stated, the Elmwood project, while it is there in 24, it is not something that will be voted for the May town meeting, and that cost is something that is still being developed, and the community will have an opportunity to weigh in on that. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made, specifically around green energy, as to where that price tag will fall. The other one that you will see is the Hopkins School addition, and what this is just really the design and engineering for FY24 or 24. 25 and on, the different projects, specifically around the district-wide study, those have been changed to reflect what was presented by Perkins Eastman as our potential additions to satisfy the enrollment and the requirements. And you can see it's also broken out by, you probably won't be looking for construction until 27. And even with 27, in FY27, you may not look for that full amount because there are several things that are part of that code upgrades. So with code upgrades, that is trying to work around occupied construction. So those are projects that would most likely happen in the summer. The design and architect refer to them as summer slammers. So that is where that 75 million probably would be spread out over a number of years, and you probably would not be asking for funding of that full amount in FY27. And this is where we would work with the town in terms of looking at the available funding and where we are in terms of what that impact would be in which fiscal year. So those are the numbers that can kind of slide around. Then when you look at the line that is the Marathon Study, Design, and Addition, as Perkins Eastman had pointed out, the changes to Marathon are for kids that are not even born yet. So that is a project that needs additional study. And so if you look at that study for 26, some of those determining factors could have an impact in what that answer is. So whatever that answer is based on that $150,000 study, you're one of and backward based on where we are. And that's how you end up with the actual column, the current column that you vote.
Can I ask you a question? So, to your point about how we actually spend the money, like for the middle school renovation, does that, so like I see that 170 million for the Marathon, for the Elmwood replacement as a placeholder this year.
we don't spend that all in one lump. So when we're voting the capital, when we're looking at this projection, are we looking at, we have to secure 170 million that we know we're going to spend over time? Or are we looking at the flow of funds over time?
So when you look at this, when we have the town meeting for the Elmwood project, which would be in late fall,
Yeah.
the town would have to vote the full amount of the project.
Yeah.
However, the actual funding and asking for, borrowings does not have to be full amount of 170,000.
Right.
That's when you work with your designer and figure out what is the amount that you'll need for year 1 of construction, year 2 of construction, year 3 of construction. So we spoke with the town CFO as he's developing kind of this financing model, and talked about the fact that the Elmwood project, in terms of funding, could really be broken out into maybe 3 phases.
Right.
So that funding, it's probably not just take it, divide by 3, but you'd have to see where that falls. So that, again, can spread out the impact over a number of years, and you would not borrow the full 170 up front. But the town would have to vote that full
Yeah.
$170,000 project.
And just one other question. Is there ever a view, particularly with the $170 million school with potential green energy installs, is there ever a view that combines operating expense offset?
So when,
for energy and so forth.
right, when those decisions are made in terms of which green energy, if you will, you'll be looking at what's considered the first cost and then the life cost. So depending on where the community falls, for instance, geothermal well could be a higher first cost, which would keep the 170 million there. However, the life cost could actually reduce your operating budget.
Right.
So those are the impacts, but we won't see those numbers until some of those decisions, and they really lay out, this is package A, package B, and those determining factors.
It's hard to see that number and remember that, for that kind of an investment, there would be year-over-year operational savings to a
Correct.
significant degree. So that's why it's hard to, I think for the community too, to see that number and then put it all together.
Right. And
Okay.
and again, that 170 million is representative of that first cost.
Yeah.
So the other piece to keep in mind, we've talked about, so the sidewalk and the loop road, and that came off of 24, but one of the things, and you'll see that in the next slide, we talked about the fact that maybe that could just be folded into the Hopkins addition in 25, because there will be site work that is needed to put a road around the addition. So do you have that same paving contractor just do the extension of the road? So you don't see that 1.5 million on there. It's out in 26, but it's one of those things that could just fall off. The other piece, when you look at the master plan traffic pattern, the middle school, high school in 26, the 2.2 million, if we're pulling the 6th grade out of the middle school and bringing them down to Hopkins, that now reduces the traffic that's going on. The further out you go, the more gray it gets, and something for everyone to keep in mind.
Differently than the Elmwood project, some of these other projects like the Hopkins and the middle school, high school, the middle school, high school, Hopkins projects, because they're not MSBA, in fact, probably all the rest of the projects are on more of an accelerated schedule. We don't have the same little checkpoints that we have with the MSBA.
Correct.
So when we're looking at this and we're looking at what the amount is being requested in, say, FY25, 6, and whatnot for the projects, is that full amount likely to be borrowed kind of in that fiscal year or within the year after it, or is it likely to be spread out a little more?
So the Hopkins, you're correct that that would be a faster timeline. I believe it's more, 18 months to 2 years. So you may indeed borrow that full amount up front.
Okay. has the town given feedback? 'Cause I don't think anybody beyond the staff has seen the tool that is being developed for the financial planning of our capital stuff. Does that look like they're going to be comfortable with the way things are laid out on the 5-year plan, even though we know there's some fluidity and some of the projects may need to be moved, as the town's able to afford it or not, things may need to be shifted? Are they comfortable with it in this format?
We have not received
Okay.
feedback.
The generators. I know we have battery storage at Marathon for our solar install. Do we use that or do we have other batteries that I don't remember that can be used as generator for the backup power? Or do we not use it in that capacity?
We don't use it in that capacity, and the generator itself does have small battery capacity. But what it does is it allows your building to run for a small amount of time for people to do what they need to do safely. It will keep some things running, like your refrigeration, but it will not run your full building for an extended period of time. And then what you do have is different battery backups for technology and phone, but again, those don't last for a long time. But what they do allow is for a slower shutdown as opposed to
Right.
just being cut off, which is always difficult or trouble for a system.
Holly and Leah, do you guys have questions that you want to make sure get called out in this? Or comments? Leah, I think you're on mute. Maybe I
She
have
just
that.
unmuted herself.
Nope. Still not hearing her. Okay, is it possible to turn the volume up in yours maybe and get her that way? Oh, there we go. We can hear you.
Oh, we get the feedback though.
All I was saying was I don't have any added questions. I think all the questions I have been called out.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Everybody there is asking all the questions that I would have. Thank you.
And
I'm afraid to speak for that.
just for my own, any of the lines that don't have dollars associated with them on this list, why are they on the list? Are they in the 6 through 10 year plan? Is that why they're on the list?
Sorry.
So there's several things on here, fire protection, security, roof replacement, that have no dollar value over the next 5 years, but are still on the list.
Because they're
They're in the 6
further
through
out.
10? Okay,
They're further
all right.
out. Yes.
Is there any sense that it would benefit the town or any of our planning purposes to narrow down which projects must be done within 5 years as opposed to projects that might be done within 5 years, in terms of, are there projects on there that we think could more comfortably be moved to 6 or 7 years rather than?
Well, and I think that is the intention of that planning tool that Mr. O'Leary put together, is for people to play with putting things out. You know, for instance, a middle school, high school project, class sizes could just increase and that project could get pushed out. You know, so those are the, like they like to talk about levers. Those are the levers that are available to the school committee.
Never easy choices.
Right.
There's not an easy answer to any of this.
Right.
I like that we're calling out all the things that are going to need to be done and putting it out there for the town to look at really transparently, to understand what the scope of all the work that we need to be done, but also like that we're engaging with the town in a way to be able to say we understand that we need to stay within what the town can afford. And that while we might hope to get all these done in 5 years, we understand that all of them may not.
Right. And again, that's why, it's a 5 and a 10 year look, but you are only authorizing year one.
Year one's the biggest one. Looking at I say that sort of in jest, but seriously, looking at the totals, when you look at this is the big year. Moving forward, we do have one other big year if we are able to make some renovations after the Elmwood project is kind of in place. But the other years are, not that they're close when you're talking about a difference of $10 million, but at least they're within ballpark of each other. And, you know, even, it almost looks like in '28, we're giving the town a little break from the schools. But that's the part of the other reason why I asked about the rest of because I mean, roof replacement is probably a pretty massive number.
That'll be a couple million.
And so, you know, looking out for years 6 through 10, I mean, we need it, but it's a lot. So how do you balance those things, right?
And again, you know, we've said this a number of times. The Elmwood School project is an end-of-life replacement of that building. It does come on the heels of the Marathon, which was an end-of-life replacement for Center School. So at some point, those buildings just do not address the educational needs of the students.
And I think too, in addition to, you know, being able to push things out, so where you don't see things in that 5-year because they land in year 6 or 7 or 8, we also put together this slide to sort of show you the malleability of some of the asks, because when you see a spreadsheet with a hard and fast number, you don't realize that there's a lot of mobility there, that you can move it forward, you can move it backwards, you can make it less, you can use different funding sources. So just quickly to move through this slide, as Mrs. Rothermick already said, when you do the Elmwood School replacement, you'd be asking for the big number up front and asking town meeting to vote on that. But if you were to phase that out over 3, you know, different years, working with your designer, that certainly changes the way the payments are made. And, you know, even when we were building Marathon, you realize that you make choices about, do you want a family resource center? What kind of brick will you use on the exterior? How green are you going to go? And all of those items are going to make that price tag fluctuate a little bit.
Dr. Kavanaugh, does the MSBA reimbursement come in one lump sum at the end, or does that sort of get broken out as you pay?
It comes as payments.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
So we submit what we have paid to the MSBA, and we do that monthly. They give us the reimbursement based on the calculation of what we have expended.
So it all nets out in the same fiscal year for
Yes.
us? Nice, okay.
Yeah, we've already talked about the Loop Road. The preschool is an interesting one. You know, as you're looking at it, you think, wow, what if you could free up about 7 classrooms if the integrated preschool were no longer housed in the Marathon School? So that gives you incredible space for, you know, the increased enrollment, but then you have the price tag of what would you be doing with your integrated preschool. The kitchen equipment, you saw that disappeared, and that's because we can pay for that upfront now through the cafeteria revolving account, really replacing the serving line at the high school. And we've had so many conversations about the congestion at lunch at the high school, and then a couple of walk-in refrigerators and freezers at the middle school, which are sort of end-of-life pieces of equipment. Marathon Playground, we've had conversations about using a GoFundMe source or working maybe with the HPTO or, you know, some of those other kinds of organizations in town to raise money. The vehicle, you know that you're already going to be paying for that out of the parking revolving. And the high school track and field, you know, that's been pushed out. But again, as Mrs. Rothermick started with, it's an end-of-life project. And you know, we often talk too about how that's a no-cut sport, and that really allows kids access to athletics who may not have some other sport that they could access. So that's an important one.
That one is end of life, but it's also capacity because of the single use of the grass football field versus
Right. And equity.
Yeah, and equity.
Yes.
So that actually has a lot bundled into it.
Sure does.
Even though it might seem more like an extra because it's not related to curriculum delivery, it's significant for many of our students.
I also love our unified track and field program and love that we're able to do that. The safety of an end-of-life project always brings to mind concerns, but when we have that many athletes and that many teams using that track, I think we have to figure out how to move that forward, whether it's bringing in some sponsorship, hopefully, or bringing it back next year.
Right.
Any other questions on that? So in terms of tonight, is there anything that we are looking for any kind of vote that we need with regard to this, or this is just we're looking transparently at what we're doing to move forward?
There's no vote. You have already voted the changes in the capital plan.
And again, back to that we vote 1 year at a time.
Correct.
Yes. And I do think it's important that we just keep sharing this information with the community because it's such important information to share.
Could you just share sort of how does this, it is a plan. It is not, obviously, as from all the discussion, set in stone. How is this being used right now? How does this plan get used by various stakeholders?
Well, it's interesting because we have always submitted a 10-year plan, and these projects, for the most part, have always been on there. Because of the Elmwood project, now this plan for the first time is really getting attention. So the town has always had this. It's always been part of their budget documents. It's not new information.
Yeah.
So I think it goes into the budget documents that the town puts forward to the select board, the appropriations, and is probably part of the town meeting packet. But again, this information has always been there. It's been there for years. The projects have always been there. The price tags have changed a little. Some projects have come up, moved along those timelines a little, but the information has always been available.
Thank you.
I have one more question. On the capital plan that was from, I think it was from December, it was on the website, the one that you mentioned. There's a line item on there for preschool, but 18 to 12 programs, and the central office building that I know is completely gone now. And that makes sense, considering we need $100 and something million for the Elmwood project. But it is also a pretty significant rental expense that the town incurs each year for those, for central office. So I think that's, even though focusing on the kids first makes sense to me, I think from a fiscal standpoint, the cost of renting that space is not cheap. And, $21 million earmarked for that back in December is a lot, but also we're spending a lot. It's like buying your house versus renting your house. We're just shelling out a lot of money for no return. We'll never get that building back, kind of thing. So, I don't know, did that move out? Is that off into the...
So I think that becomes all part of that marathon study, the feasibility study. So when you look at not only what is happening with marathon and you start to fold in the questions about preschool, then we would also elicit the conversation of expansion of the 18 to 22 program if they're in need of more square footage. So kind of where that feasibility study starts to land, that would be part of the study.
Okay. All right.
Excellent point that I know we do hear periodically people asking about how much money we're spending to lease the central office building. It would be curious, if not off the top of your head certainly, but to look at what the debt payment might be relative to what we're paying in a lease per year on a project even of $21 million.
Right.
Right. We are spending over $100,000 a year in rent.
Right.
That's a lot.
Right. I just have one final question.
Go ahead.
In general, in your conversations with our municipal partners, have you heard yet, because this is now looking 5 years out, any pressure on going green or net zero? Because we don't have any specific projects. It hasn't become a directive yet.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if any of the other departments have been asked to, in the 10-year, 5-year or 10-year look, to start to fold in. I mean, certainly our Elmwood project could go a long way to get there, which we're lucky in that regard. But absent that, there really isn't a lot here that would speak to the net zero. So have you heard anything?
I have not seen any projects in that planning that would address sustainability.
Okay. Thank you.
So just want to check in just with Holly and Leah. If you have any questions, if you want to raise your hand, I'm afraid to turn the audio on unless you have a question. Okay, good. Then anything else that you wanted to add before?
No, thank you.
Okay. So the other item on our agenda for while we're here at HCAM is the CPAC workshop that we have scheduled for next Wednesday. You may recall that at our last meeting, Amanda and I had the update that we had met with the CPAC chair and vice chair, Jamie Ronka and Jen Halliday, other way around. But we had discussed at that time having a facilitator. I did email you this morning the profile of a facilitator that they actually had found and seemed very excited about. I had the opportunity with both Jamie and Jen to meet with the facilitator yesterday just to hear a little bit about what her thoughts are. I know that she met with Dr. Kavanaugh as well today. In terms of, there were a couple things I really liked about her. She is not when I was going in, I was thinking educational consultant, and that she's not an educational consultant so much as a facilitator, mediator that really specializes more in relationships, in working with groups that have had challenges. But she has background. She was a school committee member for 7 years in another district, school committee chair for 3 years. She has experience with special education, so she has the knowledge base of the pieces that are in play here, but really focused on kind of moving us something forward. She's also new to all of us. She doesn't have any preconceived thoughts on Hopkinton or our CPAC group or our school committee. And really one of the things she was emphasizing was that district administrators and school committee members and CPAC members all really come into this wanting to do well by kids. And our roles might be a little bit different, and sometimes our roles create a little bit of disagreement, but that's not always a bad thing if you can kind of find the sweet spot of where that advances things forward. My recommendation, based on having met with her, would be that we move forward with her and start next week with the meeting. But if people are uncomfortable for any reason at all, she really emphasized how everybody should feel comfortable with having the mediator come in. There are other opportunities to look through DESE for another one, but it would likely have to be at a different date. So that's.
I have no objections. I feel like she seems very knowledgeable and experienced. So I mean, not having met her, spoken to her ever, I guess I'm okay with. If this is somebody who you think is going to be a good fit for what we have going on.
I think so, and I think one of the things we had talked about is she would meet with the CPAC chair and vice chair, and she would meet with Amanda and I. Unfortunately, not all of us because of the meeting law, and then she would meet with Dr. Kavanaugh and Dr. Zaleski to get a little bit of kind of each group of stakeholders, kind of what we're looking for, kind of moving forward, and kind of a little bit of the history, but not wanting to sort of rehash everything that happened over the past few years, but also not wanting it to be like an elephant in the room, to acknowledge the challenges we went through, but also to try to focus on how do we work together moving forward. And that she'll have those meetings ahead of time, help with the agenda for the actual meeting itself, and then kind of help with the next steps, and then likely there would be some follow-up work with her after that. So that's the other thing is, do people have questions about her that, and I'm looking at Dr. Kavanaugh's screen because I can then see Leah and Holly, even though you don't know I'm looking at you. But do you guys have thoughts, questions, concerns at all? Okay.
I mean, again, not having met her, I think for this meeting, it's nice that she's new to everybody. So I appreciate that. I like that she's been connected, although she hasn't been, working with DESE, for example, but she has been a school committee member. You said she has connections to CPAC. I mean, for me personally, I think that a facilitator would be outstanding in this meeting. I don't know that a mediator is what I feel like we need, but I think a facilitator to help us all get out of the meeting what we need to get out of it is great. So I trust you. I mean, Dr. Kavanaugh, do you have any reservations?
No, I don't. In fact, I was able to talk with her for about 30 minutes today, and I felt like she continued to ask, what were our hoped for outcomes, and I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I like the hope for outcomes and the hopes and dreams of all of us in this, and the acknowledgement that we're all working for the same thing in need. I think the facilitation piece, I agree with you. Facilitator would be more of the word I would seek rather than mediator, but it gives me hope. I guess after meeting with her, I felt excited for the possibilities. Okay. right, then I will circle back to her. It is sort of a short timeline because we're meeting with her a week from tomorrow in the meeting, so that I'll circle back to her tomorrow and also to let CPAC know that we are pleased to be moving forward with that.
And we are funding,
Yes, the district is able to find the funding based on my conversations with
Yes.
Dr. Cavan.
out of our development budget, probably.
Okay, so then at this time, I think we probably should consider moving on to Town Hall to join our partners at the Select Board. I think we probably need a motion to adjourn out of this for the purpose of re-adjourning at the Select Board meeting.
So moved.
Okay?
Okay, sure, second.
Okay, so we're going to do a roll call because we're not all here. I'll start with you, Jen.
Yes.
Amanda?
Aye.
I am an aye. Holly? Leah? Okay, so Holly and Leah are both a yes. And we are adjourned at 6:15 and we'll reconvene at 6:30 at Town Hall. Thank you.
All right.